All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So the Atomic Habits is a book it is a bestseller, and it has done very well in all around the world. It's a book that I have read. It's a book that I've also listened to in addition to reading it, and I've also listened to the summary of it about 2 or 3 times. So you could say that I've immersed myself in the book a fair bit over the last year or two. And what I've done in this particular presentation is to try to, I guess, the tips that are being provided by John Cleary, to try to have them give some examples of how they could be applied for things that we're going to do during Ramadan. And I think that's what is quite important about this. So, one thing that the author says is you are your habits. So we do make up a big part of our life is our habits. We do things. Some of our habits are consciously done, some are unconsciously done, but they are habits that mold a lot of our life. And in the Quran, the word, atoms, when I thought of the word atoms, the Quranic verse that comes to my mind is, whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it. So again, I feel that that Quranic verse is highlighting the importance of even atomic habits or atomic deeds, and in a way encouraging us to do those good deeds, even if they're of atomic weight, so that we can then keep doing it, or trying to deter us from not doing the ones that are not good. Okay, so success is the product of daily habits, not once in a lifetime transformations. So we often think about how we want to, make life-changing decisions. A lot of the time we talk about, New Year resolutions, or sometimes we might talk about Ramadan resolutions. So these are all good, but we often find that, a day or two or a week after we make these resolutions, we're not able to quite follow through with them. And so this is where, breaking down those goals and looking at what we're doing to try to achieve that, it becomes more important. It doesn't mean we shouldn't set goals. Goals are still important, but in a way, lofty goals without processes is where the problem really lies. So in the book, the author gives the example of, a plane that's going from New York to Los Angeles. And basically, if you move that airplane by 20 centimeters, just 20 centimeters, which is smaller than my screen at the moment, you will end up in basically Mexico. So one small move can change the trajectory of your life. It can change the trajectory of your actions and deeds. So that's where we're coming into this discussion from that perspective. And it's usually those little changes, those little incremental improvements that are, that make the significant change. So 1% improvement, basically, if a person makes 1% improvement every single day, and when you think about it, 1% isn't a lot. If you're reading a book, one book page, the next day basically it means you're reading 1.1 pages. So it might be 1 page and one line, for example. But if you continue that for a year, you're going to be doing 37 times better than you were at the beginning of the year. So the results are quite exponential, but all it takes is 1% per day, in this case, per day, to make a change. The thing is, when we do go to make change, we often want to see the results straight away. Okay, so you start doing something new, like you start walking, or you start reading, or you start to learn a new language. You want to see the changes straight away. But the author talks about how there's this valley of disappointment, because that's where you barely see any changes, but there is actually improvement happening. But the key is, if you continue chipping away at it, and you continue to have that atomic habit day in, day out, that you will eventually see that exponential looking like growth taking place. So this is what we think should happen. I guess that's the thing. We think there should be this constant increase at the same pace, but it actually doesn't happen. Initially, particularly initially, you will barely see any change. And the key thing is knowing this, knowing that if you're making a small change in your habits, you're not going to see yourself transformed. But over time, you will, if you persist and if you continue, you will start to see the changes. So that's an important point to remember when we're talking about creating habits. The other key point that's made, so this is before we're talking about the 5 rules of habit making. Another important thing is how you approach, your goals or your habits. Like rather than saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, the author really recommends that you connect it with your identity. So it's about who are you, because when you connect it with your identity, you have more ownership of that particular task. So rather than saying, this is the example he gives, rather than saying, I'm going to write daily, he says, why don't you say, I'm a writer, I'm an author. So when you tell yourself you're an author, you take more ownership of that writing skill. So if with the team leader example that he provides, rather than saying, I am going to instruct a team, why not say, I'm a leader? So again, you're owning that as part of your identity. And I wrote here the proficient in Arabic. So say that's the outcome that one wants. Rather than saying, I will attend weekly classes, Arabic classes, to say, I'm a student of Arabic. And I think to some degree we do this well because we all see ourselves, say, as a student of our religion. We all see ourselves as a student, even scholars. When you ask them, they will see themselves as students. So I think that's a really powerful way to approach a new habit that we want to do, but connecting it back to your habits is really important. To your identity is really important. You make it part of your identity, then create the processes, and then you see the outcomes. Whereas we start with, okay, what outcome do we want? And then we're trying to, I guess, convince ourselves that that's what we want to do. So make it part of your identity. The other thing that is important part of the book is the habit loops. And I guess in a way, I feel the whole book is trying to address this part of, who we are or how we combat habits or improve on our habits. We have, with our habits, we have a cue, then we have a craving, a response, and then a reward. So cue, craving, response, reward. So the first one, and that's could be a good example, is boredom. Say you're at work and you're getting bored, okay, or you're at school, you're getting bored. You're at home and sitting down, you're getting bored. Your cue is boredom. So your craving is to overcome that boredom. So how do you overcome that boredom? You could say that your response is to go on social media. You go on social media, your reward is that boredom goes away. So you can see, so then every time you get bored, you're going to go down that, if it's become a habit with you, more likely than not, you're going to go down that pathway. Stress could be another one. Your cue is stress. So you're craving to get rid of that stress. Your response is eating junk food. The reward is you feel better. Even if it's temporarily, you feel better. That stress is gone. Interestingly, in our religion, this is a very powerful habit creating system, especially, I guess, this is more likely in Muslim countries where the adhan, call to pray, is, cited out loudly. Adhan could be the cue, craving is to pray, response you pray, and the reward is you have prayed. So you could replace this, therefore, if your cue to stress is eating junk food, finding a different response. Is cue to your response to stress might be going for a walk. I know that some people do that. They go for a walk. The cue to when you're stressed, you might say, I'm going to read Quran. I know, again, some people who do that or who play the Quran. So you try to connect a particular cue with a response. And through repetition, the idea is then you will, each time that cue happens, you have a particular response. So really, you've got to work out how this happens in your life, but you do have this in your system where you have a cue, craving, response, and then the reward. So the 4 laws of good habits, so we'll go through them one by one. The first one is make it obvious. Okay, so your habits are so automatic that you don't even realize you have them. So the author suggests that you become conscious of your habits. You can make a list of all your daily habits, for example, and they're not always bad habits. You will have good habits, you'll have neutral habits, but you'll also have bad habits. So there's going to be a mixture, but identifying them and listing them can help, especially when we look at some of the other tasks that are recommended on how to create good habits. It's good to know what habits you do have and through that you identify what habits you want to remove and, you know, what other habits you want to create. But be conscious, like ask yourself, what habits do I have? What are good, what are bad, and what's neutral? Yeah, then the next thing is when you want to create a new habit, the key thing is first you identify the new habit, right? You want to create a new habit, identify, be specific with it. Specific with time and place for your new habit. So the bad example is I want to read more. So it's saying, oh, I want to create a new habit where I actually read more. Yeah, that's my new habit. I want to be a reader. But what's important, it's a bit like the SMART, you know, specific, measurable, and I can't remember the rest, but the SMART goals, it's a bit like that. In this sense, you have to be specific. I will read the 2 pages of my book in the spare room at 2 p.m. So you're very specific about what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, what time you're going to do it. And the minute that you specify it like this, then the more chances are that you will actually do it. So think about if you want to create a new habit, what kind of, you know, what would you exactly do to reach that? If you want to go for a walk, it could be I will walk at 5 p.m. Monday and Wednesday and Friday, two times around the block. So you're being specific. Otherwise, if you say I want to walk more, you know, it doesn't really say much. Now, this is a very interesting one, and I feel that this, for me, was a very powerful one. Stack your new habits on an existing habit. So we all have habits, right? We've all got habits that we do. He's basically saying stack a new one on an existing one. It just makes it easier. Rather than creating a new time, new place, you already got a habit that's at a particular time, at a particular place, and stack your new one on that. So rather than saying, oh, we'll read more Quran, so we're going into Ramadan now, and a lot of us have aspire to read more Quran. You know, rather than saying, okay, during Ramadan, I'm going to read more, stack it on an existing habit. So, or an existing routine. So a good example would be, I'll read 2 pages of Quran after ISRA prayer, after the afternoon prayer. So if, you know, ISRA prayer is something you're doing constantly, then adding something onto it is going to be much easier than creating a completely new habit. So reading 2 pages of Quran after Asr prayer, or you know, another habit you might have is, you know, when you're brushing your teeth in the mornings. That's something that he refers to often. After I brush my teeth, when I leave the bathroom, I'm going to do my dhikr for 30 minutes. So you brush your teeth, that's something you're going to do every morning, and then stacking it onto that. It's called habit stacking, and it makes it much easier to create new habits in that way. The other thing is the environment. This is a big part of habit creation. According to the author, you know, environment is much more important, and that motivation is overrated according to him. And overrated more than willpower, because having the willpower to always resist something takes a lot of energy. But if you created an environment where you are able to more easily do a good habit, then you are going to save yourself a lot of energy. You're going to save yourself a lot of energy trying to find the willpower to do it and the motivation to do it. So here, this is from the author. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. So your environment is critical. And it has cues. So it prompts you. Your environment is actually constantly prompting you. So depending on what environment you have, the prompting is going to be accordingly. So let's take the example of drinking more water. Say you feel like you should be drinking more water. You wish that you had the habit of drinking more water. The example is place water bottles in different rooms, for example. So you go to your living room, there's a bottle of water. You go to your bedroom, there's a bottle of water. Go to your study room, there's water. So the chances are you're going to drink more water because there's water bottles everywhere. So you feel that you should floss more, you know, and you don't floss every day and you wish that you did floss more. Put the floss next to the toothpaste. Again, so by putting it there, you're more likely to floss your teeth because it's there, it's visible. The cue is there. It's looking at you saying, use me to floss your teeth. Say if you want to therefore, you know, read more Quran, place the Quran on your desk. So it's sitting there, maybe right next to your laptop or wherever. Put it so that you can, it is a cue for you to open the Quran, and there is going to be more chance that you will actually open it because it's there, visible, and it's, you know, it's looking at you basically, and you are looking at it. So environment is much more important than we realize. And if we prop or create our environment appropriately, we won't need to rely as much on willpower and motivation. So that's the key messaging of this. The author is big on one space, one use. So this, you know, it doesn't mean that you need a huge house to be able to do this. You could have a particular desk, you know, where you, if that's your study place, you do your studies there. But if you have a, you know, in your lounge room, you've got a couch. If you associate that couch with having a nap, or if you associate that couch with watching TV, then trying to do, I guess, you know, spiritual activities on that particular couch may not be easy. Or if you try to do work on that couch, or if you try to read, it's not going to be easy because you're going to be tempted to switch on the TV because that's the couch where you would normally watch TV. So you would allocate certain zones for doing certain things. So you might have a particular chair where you do your reading. So you leave your book there, so the cue's there, and that particular couch becomes your reading zone. The eating, you might say, I'm only going to eat in the kitchen. I'm not going to take food out of the kitchen into my bedroom or into the lounge room. So that becomes your eating zone, the kitchen. So that should help you create good habits as well. And your bed. So rather than the bed being, I guess, where you might be watching movies or surfing the net, you say, this is my sleeping zone. And therefore, you're more likely to then use that. So when you go into bed, you don't get confused between, is it my sleeping time or is it my watching movie time? It becomes clear to you and to your mind and to your body what that particular setting is for. So that's a very big part of, you know, the book and what he encourages. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you need to have 10 rooms in your house to, you know, to be able to do this. Even if you live in a one-bedroom unit, you might have a particular couch that becomes your reading zone. You might have a particular table in the lounge room that's your study zone. So it could be a particular space within a room that you associate with a particular task or with a particular habit. I guess another important part of, or the flip of making it obvious is for good habits is to make it invisible for a bad habit. So not only do we want to create good habits, but we also want to remove bad habits. And so making it invisible. So too much time on social media, you know, that's something that a lot of us complain about. So one thing you could do is remove apps from phone. So if you don't have the apps on your phone for social media, then it's not going to be as easy to go onto social media because then you need to log on through your computer. Your computer's not going to be with you all the time like your phone is. So you're creating that difficulty. If you feel like you eat too much junk food, then Don't keep junk food in the house. Don't buy it, or buy certain amounts. Don't overdo it. I guess you need to again work out what works for you. But if you make it invisible, then the chances are that you basically won't be seeing it, and therefore it's not a cue for you to go on and do it. So that's the flip of making it obvious, because the making obvious is for good habits, and for breaking a bad habit, make it invisible. So that was the first one, make it obvious. So as you can see, environment was a big part of that, creating the right environment. And it's interesting, when last few weeks ago when I was talking about this, someone said, I'm going to create in my house like a little masjid, like one of the rooms, they were going to transform it into a masjid. So that's where they would have a prayer mat and maybe have a Quran stand. So that room becomes like their masjid, and when they go in there, or when they want to do worship, extra worship, they go into that room, and therefore they're more inclined, or it creates that atmosphere that motivates and encourages them to do worship. So how you apply this, is really up to you. So the second law is make it attractive. You might think, how do you make habits attractive? Well, let's see. Now, one thing about habits is that dopamine is released when we anticipate pleasure, not just when we experience pleasure. So this was important, and the author talks about this in, with how it's been shown with research. So it's not just when we're experiencing pleasure, but actually saying that a lot of the time when we're anticipating the pleasure, the dopamine surge is higher. The dopamine is higher. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter in our system that actually makes us happy. We talk about a dopamine rush when we do something and it feels good. And for example, social media uses this strategy a lot. You get likes, that gives you a dopamine rush. You get shares, that gives you a dopamine rush. So they worked out the psychology behind this and what it is that motivates people to, say, use social media. Look, I know I'm slamming social media a lot. I think it's one of those things where if you use it wisely, it's not a bad thing. But also, I guess we have to remember that we need to be in control of how much we use it. I guess it's just a very good example to use. That's why I keep using it, because most of us are on it. And the examples I'm giving would make sense to you. So with the dopamine spikes, social media, eating junk food and taking drugs is associated with dopamine spikes. So these are examples, and I just gave you the example of social media. So just the thought of like eating junk food, say having the ice cream, peeling open that packet, the packet of the ice cream, or unscrewing the lid of the Nutella jar. So these things will give you a dopamine rush. Taking drugs, again, apparently based on research, before they take the drug, they actually get that dopamine rush, or the dopamine spike. So the dopamine spike happens before the thing. And the point about sometimes, or a lot of the times, anticipation of the vacation is better than the actual vacation. So if you're particularly someone who loves going on holidays, planning for that holiday excites you a lot, gets that dopamine spike going. And that's, I think, one reason now I realize why some people, when they go on a holiday, when they return from their holiday, they actually book their next holiday straight after. So it's like anticipating the next holiday, even if it's a year later. The idea that they've booked for it and they'll start slowly planning for it, that anticipation makes them happy. So anticipation for these kind of, I guess, habits is what causes dopamine spikes and makes us happy. So since, there are things that make us happy, the dopamine that causes the dopamine spikes. And so, this is an important point here. Gambling addicts have a dopamine spike right before they place a bet, not after they win. So it's before the actual, the bet, that I guess there's that adrenaline, but that dopamine, that excitement that comes with it, and the dopamine. So what he says is to do what we call temptation bundling. So something that all gives you that dopamine spike or dopamine rush or makes you happy, which is basically what we want to do, and connecting that with what we need to do. So if someone loves watching, and he gives Netflix example a lot, loves watching Netflix, but they might dread exercise. So while they're watching Netflix, doing exercise. So you're connecting, bundling something you have to do or you need to do with something that you want to do. In this example, not saying you dread reading Quran, but you might want to enjoy it more, actually. So, and again, you wouldn't do this during Ramadan, but maybe after iftar, you might love that coffee drinking. So you might associate a lot of pleasure with having a cup of coffee and enjoying that coffee. So you might then think, oh, I love doing that, so I'm going to read Quran when I'm drinking coffee. And through that, again, you're creating that that temptation bundling's happening. Another example I thought of is like dhikr. You might say, I want to do more dhikr as in remembrance of Allah. And it might not come naturally to you. And you might be someone who loves being in nature, like it gives you a high to be in nature. You enjoy being immersed in it. So you might then bundle those together. So while you're in nature, something you want to do, you do what you feel you need to do, which is to do dhikr. So think of it in this way, I guess, in a way, almost any habit or anything that you do which you like doing, you can bundle with it something that you feel that you need to do. And it gives quite interesting examples where with the watching Netflix, I think, or, you know, there was it's like a generator that was connected to it. So if the person they were on a bike, like a indoor exercise bike, and when the wheels were moving, then it would create enough electricity to be able to keep the TV on so that they can watch Netflix. So that's taking it to another level, but having that kind of connection between what you need to do and what you want to do. The other thing is group influence. Like, this is huge as well. So this is about, remember, making it easy. Until now, we talked about the bundling, but also group influence makes it easy as well. So we tend to imitate the habits of 3 social groups, according to the author: our close friends, family and friends, the many, the tribe, and the powerful, those with status and prestige. So basically, you need to try to surround yourself as much as you can with people who have the habits that you want, or the habit that you want. You know, so if you want to read more, for example, you would join a book club. You know, the book club is full of people who want to read or who love reading. So if you're part of a book club, the chances are you're going to read more. The powerful, I guess, I'm thinking more like if you follow, say you're on social media, if you're following, you know, people like Omar Suleiman, who's big, or Yasir Qadhi, who's big, and, you know, and listening to their lectures, or Yasmin Mogahed, you would be influenced by what they're saying. So listening more to their lectures, because I guess they have a greater influence on the masses, that will also influence your behavior. So really think of it, whatever habit you want, find a group that does that, and you are more likely to create that habit. And when I was reading this, it reminded me of this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ: a person follows the religion of their friend, so each one should consider whom they befriend. We are so much influenced by our friends. We can't actually at all decide who our family is. We're born into a particular family, but we can decide who our friends are. So if we have friends who have particular characteristics, if they have particular habits, the chances are we're going to have those habits as well. So this might be a time to do some spring cleaning with your friends. I know it's easier said than done, but they do influence who we are. And I guess the tribe, in a way, is that the community that you're part of, like if you're part of a particular organization, or if you attend, you know, weekly halakas, for example, something where you've got a collective. that will also influence your habits and who you are as a person. So think about that and how you could influence that in your lives. So this is another one. I feel like this one's a bit, it's easier said than done. And that's why I said at the beginning, some of the ideas that are put forward, you will connect with more than others. This one, again, it might work for some people really well, but for others, you might think, you know, it's easier said than done. But one thing he says is reprogram your brain to enjoy hard habits. So it's really about perspective. It's about changing the way you view it. And maybe it requires a fair bit of self-talk. You just have to keep reminding yourself, and that might help, you know, change the way you perceive it. So James Clear says you can make hard habits more attractive if you can learn to associate them with a positive experience. Okay, so if you see it as a positive, or you see the positives. So the example he would give is fatigue, you know, fitness. I want to become fitness, so habits associated with fitness. The negative is fatigue. If you think, oh, if I go to the gym, I'm just going to get really, really tired. So you have this negative association with fitness. But if you try to focus on the positives, think I'm going to become fitter, it's good for my well-being. So if you focus on that, then you're more inclined to be able to, I guess, embrace that habit. Cleaning the house. You know, negative, could you think, what a waste of time? You might say, I spent 2 hours cleaning the house. You know, it's going to get dirty again. So you might be thinking about that. The positive is, you might say, the environment is conducive to peace of mind. If the house is clean, I'm going to feel, you know, better. I'm going to feel more relaxed. I'm going to feel more at peace. So you try to associate with the positive. Saving money. You might think negative sacrifice. You know, I can't do half the things I want to because I'm trying to save money. So that could be seen as a negative, but you might think of it as a future financial freedom. And with fasting as well, like as we're going into getting closer to the month of Ramadan, you know, you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to be starving. I'm going to be so thirsty. And if you focus on that, you're going to dread it, and it's going to be much harder to do. But if you focus on the positives, like, you know, through the fasting, I'm going to, inshallah, gain the pleasure of Allah. I'm going to become much more self-disciplined. I'm going to have spiritual growth. Like if you remind yourself, if you want to self-talk, through that self-talk, remind yourself of all the benefits that you're going to get from fasting. There's going to be less resistance on your part, and you're going to embrace it much more when it actually comes around. And this might need repetition in itself, like, you know, reminding yourself every day or every hour, I don't know, or talking to people about it as well. Sometimes talking about the positives, like if you were with fasting, if you constantly complain to your family saying, oh gosh, it's going to be so hard, I'm going to be working and I'm going to be fasting and that's impacting. You're wiring your brain in a particular way. Whereas every day with your family or your friends, you're like, this is, you know, we don't know if we're going to make it to the next Ramadan. This is a great way to purify our sins. You know, we're going to, inshallah, gain the pleasure of Allah through our fasting and our worship. Just saying it helps to transform you. You will feel better just saying it. So that positive association is really important. The third law, so the second one was make it attractive. So it's all about making it attractive. First was making it obvious, make it attractive, and the third one is make it easy. Okay, so that's something that's very important too. So the first point that is made is habits are not based on time, they are based on repetition. So repetition, repetition, repetition is very important. So this means that the more you do it, the more times you do it, the more the habit is likely to stick. So I've given you an example. Say you want to have the habit of reading Quran. There's two possible scenarios. You read 1 page of Quran per day. That means 365 repetitions per year. Or you can go with, I'm going to read 20 pages in one go, once a month, basically one day of the month, 20 pages. that means 12 repetitions per year. So according to this, and even with this, I'm just calculating 20 times 12, 240 pages you read. 240, so 20 pages at once is quite a bit, but you end up reading 240 pages. With this one, say if you took this approach, you would actually be reading 365 pages. But more than that, it's not so much about how the quantity, but the repetitions. The fact that you're repeating it, the same habit 365 times, the chances are that the habit is more likely to stick. So focus on repetition rather than the load of each time you do something. And that's why, like with walking, if you're walking, 20 minutes a day, you're more likely to stick to that than if you walked 1 hour once a week, because that repetition creates the habit. The other thing is the reduced friction, the law of least effort. So we don't like friction as human beings, and so you have to think of ways to reduce friction so that the less energy there is for you to do something, the more likely you are to do it. So the bigger the obstacle, the more friction there is between you and the desired outcome. So that's why reading 1 page of Quran daily is easier to get into the habit than, say, reading 20 pages of Quran daily. So this depends on your habits. Like if you're someone who reads 20 pages already, then you're not going to have this challenge. But we're talking about, say, if someone doesn't normally read daily, for them to say, that's it, from now on, every day I'm going to read 20 pages, it might be a challenge. Having said that, I do think Ramadan is a different time because we go into a completely different mindset, most of us, in Ramadan. So those of us who may not read 20 pages a day may be able to during Ramadan. But I guess you have to think about what's realistic with you and try to do what you think you'll be able to do daily. Yeah. I'm just smiling because I was listening to someone today about Tarawih prayers, and he says you have the Muslims who come to Tarawih on the first day and the last day, but you never see them in between. So in a way, it's like you don't want to be like that. You want consistency. If that consistency means twice a week, then so be it. If it means, once every second day, that's consistency. So you have to think what is possible for you to actually do it, to get over that threshold of that obstacle. And even things like attending Tarawih at a local mosque is easier than driving an hour away from another mosque. He gives the example of someone wanting to go to the gym. So he says basically, if there's a gym on your way, if you want to go to the gym regularly, if you sign up to a gym that's on your way home from work, you're more likely to do it. But if that requires a 20-minute detour from your work to home, then you're less likely to do it. So you just have to think, what's the easiest way for this to become part of my life? So when I was talking about this, I just remembered, there's a Quran Khatim sort of program happening with ISRA, and they've done it, organized it from, say, I should say, but it's Sydney that's done it, from 12 to 1. So to me, that's quite appealing because you're at work, 12 to 1, it's your lunchtime, it's Ramadan, you're not fasting, so the chances are you're likely to do it. But if that was to be done, say, 6 a.m., 6 to 7 a.m., it's less likely to happen. Or if it's done at 9 to 10 a.m., or post-Tarawih, again, less likely to happen. So you try to find how you can incorporate it best into, I guess, your life, so you do actually end up doing it. So reduce the friction. Prime the environment for use. So this is where it's like putting prompts around so that you actually get things done. And this reduces the friction as well. So the example of exercise given in the book. So lay out your working clothes from the night before so you can get moving in the morning. If you want to eat healthier snacks, keep a bowl of fruit on your kitchen bench top. So normally our fruits are in the drawer, say in the fridge, in the drawer part. You've got to open the drawer, you've got to find it amongst the plastic bags. And so you're less likely to eat those, let's say, apples if they're in the drawer. But if you have a bowl on your bench top, say with apples, and that's one of the examples the author gives, you're more likely to eat those apples because it's more accessible. Your environment is being primed so that you actually eat them. So going to Tarawih, you might think, okay, what can I do? How do I prime my environment? You might put your prayer clothes or your prayer mat, whatever it is, something that you would basically take with you near the front door, maybe, before going to work, so that you can go to Tarawih after work and iftar. So you come home, you have your, iftar, so you eat, and then you've got something there like a prompt that is going to remind you and make it easier for you to go to Tarawih. Or if you wear particular shoes when you're going to Tarawih, getting them out and putting them in front of the door. Something that's going to prompt you and make it more likely for you to actually, do that thing that you want to do. The 2-minute rule. This is, again, the idea with this one is to stop the procrastinating, as it says. So basically to get you moving, to get you started. Because sometimes when we want to do something, we make it big in our minds. Like it's, oh, I just don't want to do it. Just give me 10 more minutes. That's so big. We procrastinate. We want to do it later. We delay it and so forth. So here, basically, it says reduce the desired habit to 2 minutes. So if it's a 30-minute walk, don't think of it as a 30-minute walk. If it's a 1-hour lecture you want to listen to, don't think of it as a 1-hour lecture. Break it down and start on it. That's the idea. So the running a marathon, you want to start or be a runner. Rather than thinking, okay, I'm starting to run a marathon, putting your runners on and stretching. So again, the idea is if once you've put your runners on, your shoes on, sneakers on, and you've started stretching, the chances are you will go and start running. It's very unlikely that you'll put your sneakers on, stretch, and then go back and sit on the couch. It's not impossible, but very unlikely. Say one of your goals or habits, desired habits, is to read an hour per day. So rather than saying, okay, I'm going to read 20 pages again or 1 hour, you just focus on reading that one page. So I'm going to read this one page, get through this. So you focus on that. And again, the idea is after that, you're more likely to continue with the reading. So listening to 1 hour Islamic lecture per day, you might think, wow, that's so big, 1 hour lecture. When am I going to do it? I'll do it later. Rather than thinking of it that way, you might say, I'm going to listen to a lecture for 2 minutes. Okay, and again, the chances are you'll probably listen to it for longer than 2 minutes. It's just about getting started. So again, this is going to probably appeal to some of you more than others. Some of you the procrastinating may not be a challenge, although I do think we all procrastinate to some degree. But it could be a tactic that does actually work for you and that does help you. Breaking a bad habit, making it difficult. So this is where, just if there's a habit you don't want, make it hard for yourself. So if you've got too much social media, remove the app from your phone. Too much time on the phone during Ramadan, put your phone in another room for a few hours. Like after iftar, you might say, okay, I'm going to put my phone, in the spare room, and I'm not going to, because it's in another room, you're less likely to touch it. He gives many examples of this. Where this man, one of the workers, like a CEO, he would give his phone to his secretary and ask her to change the password so that he wouldn't know the password. Therefore, he couldn't check his phone. There was another example given of there was an author. He needed to write a book, but he had to write this book, and he was given a deadline, but he was too busy going out doing things, and he just wouldn't get this book done. And towards the end, basically, they said to me, if you're not going to write it, we're going to cancel the contract. And what he did is he collected all his going out clothes into a bag, and he gave it to someone who took it, out of his home. And because he had no clothes to go out with, he was stuck at home, basically. He had to stay home, and because he was home, he was able to write the book. So it's like making things, if it's too much PlayStation, unplug it. Unplug that PlayStation. So it's harder, makes it harder for you because each time you've got to plug it in. or unplug it and put it in a drawer so that each time you want to use it, you're going to, again, take it out of the drawer. So making it difficult like that. Too much Netflix during Ramadan, cancel your subscription if that's your challenge. So think about what how you can make it more difficult for yourself. So the last one is making it satisfying. So the third was making it attractive. So rewarding yourself and feeling successful. So this one, the important way to make a habit stick is to feel successful, even if it is in a small way. So I guess the point made here is with certain things, we don't feel rewarded until, or we don't see the results until maybe a few weeks, a few months. Like you can take losing weight. If you want to lose weight, you're on a diet, you're not going to really see the results for potentially weeks. And so what he suggests here is that, you give yourself little rewards along the way, so that motivates you. So say you want to reduce carb intake, or, you're doing more walks because you want to lose weight. Putting aside $5 for each kilo you lose for the dress you want to buy. So each time you put that $5 and you see your money building up, it's like you're rewarding yourself before that final goal is achieved. Praying Tarawih. Putting aside $10 each day you pray Tarawih, say to contribute towards an Eid gift you will get yourself at the end of the Ramadan. I guess here I said caution about intention. So I think this is really important, because when we're talking about acts of worship, ibadah, or things we're doing for the sake of Allah, you have to keep your intention very clear. Like you wouldn't, even this is probably questionable how much you would be able to apply it, but you wouldn't pray Tarawih because you want to need gift. You would pray Tarawih because you want Allah to be pleased with you. You would be doing it for the sake of Allah. You would be waiting for the reward from Allah. So this is a bit like a slippery slope area, I think. Habit tracking, we do this a lot with kids, and it's probably something we can do more. Maybe some of you do as well. But tracking becomes a reward in itself. Like, I've seen some, with younger kids that have the Ramadan days, and each time the child fasts, you put across day 1, day 2. That in itself is, very appealing to a person. Or completing an entry into your exercise log, like keeping track, I've done this many steps or this many, this many, in a way, a lot of us have it, our watches, like Fitbit's watches that track how many steps we do. That's in a way what this is all about. It's habit tracking. The more steps we have, the more it shows, it's documented. That gives us, makes us feel good. So those kind of entries can also help. But we could do it with other things like writing an X on your calendar for every juz of the Quran that you read. So you just see yourself progressing, like, okay, I've done 3 juzes, I've got this many to go. So that kind of documentation might also help. And the reality is we are going to have bad days. So it's not always going to be, we're killing it, we're doing all the right things. We will have bad days. And the author says to be conscious that you are going to have those bad days and to be ready for them when they do happen. It's important to show up. It's better that you show up half-hearted, with half effort, than not to show up at all. Don't break the chain. So for example, if you've been reading, say, 10 pages of Quran per day, and that particular day you just are not going to feel like you're not going to be able to read those 10 pages, then read 1 page on your bad day. So do something. Doing something is better than not doing it at all. As he says, lost days hurt you more than successful days help you. So you feel that regression straight away if you're not doing it constantly. So yeah, but it's better to do something rather than doing nothing at all. And this is another thing, make it less satisfying. Breaking a bad habit, make it less satisfying. A lot of the time when we do bad habits, we do it so quietly that no one knows. So this is where you could, as he suggests, that you can have an accountability partner. Someone who you feel closely enough, who you can have kind of like this agreement, and who is going to call you up on it. So with the workout, if I miss a workout, I might say, okay, that's it. Say, Magda, if I miss a workout, I'm going to pay you $10. And if I say I'm going to commit to 2 days of workout a week, let's say, every time I miss out, I pay you $10. So it actually hurts me more because not only am I not doing the workout, but I have to pay someone for it. Or if I say, okay, that's it, I'm going to read Quran 10 pages a day. And I say, Zainab, if I don't read it, I'm going to have to tell you. I have to say, Zainab, guess what? Today I didn't read 10 pages of Quran. So that in itself hurts because it's kind of admitting defeat, or you have to admit it to someone. So it really has to be someone that you feel comfortable enough to do it with, and someone who's going to, as I said, call up on you. Going to Tarawih. So if you say that if I don't go on the weekends, on both Saturday, Sunday, I have to message you. So again, then you have to message that person. It just makes it that little bit more, because you think I'd rather do it than message that person and not tell them that I didn't do it. So there's that kind of accountability. So finally, my final slide. One thing the book doesn't do, obviously, it's I guess it's obvious, is it in a way puts the onus all on the human being, which is understandable. We do have willpower and we are accountable. We have decision making. But we have to not forget the power of dua and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help as well. We shouldn't just rely on ourselves, but we should also depend on Allah. So if I was to rewrite this book or, add an extra part, it would be this part. There's a hadith, nothing repels divine decree but supplication. So in a way, it's according to this hadith, based on this hadith, your qadar or your qadar can be influenced by your dua, your supplication. So don't underestimate this. And I'll give you an example from myself with this. One of the things I've been wanting to do is to learn Arabic. And last year particularly, I was making a lot of dua for this. And I was even thinking at the end of the year, end of 2022, maybe I should go to Egypt, because I had some colleagues and friends who went to Egypt to learn Arabic. So maybe I should go to Egypt to learn Arabic. But then we had and I made a lot of dua for it. And then we had a situation where a Quran teacher from Egypt came to Australia, not only Australia, but she came to Melbourne to teach us Quran for 4 weeks, a 4-week intensive. And to me, that was like an answering of my duas. And it really progressed. This was like my 5th attempt at learning how to read Quran. So it really progressed my learning of the language. And so I feel like I've developed the understanding more than I have had before. But not only that, I guess other tips in the book also came to effect, as in, we have Friday night online classes now as a group. And I have to turn up, because if I don't turn up, it's awkward. Everyone else is there and I feel bad. Also, it's like that tribe. We have a tribe of people who want to learn how to Quran. So because you think they want to, I want to, we want to develop our Quran, our Arabic further. That really helps us and motivates us as well. And I guess I've created some other positive associations with it. With learning, so you can do it, but I would say that the dua has a big role to play. But remember that our physical actions are also like a dua. It's a type of dua, because you're basically saying, oh Allah, I'm undertaking these actions, I'm trying to create these habits, I'm using these strategies because I want this response, oh Allah, and the responses are from you. So by trying to create these strategies, it's actually a type of dua as well. So remember that. And keep your intentions pure for matters relating to worship. The book is very much about rewards, as you saw. But a lot of the time we're trying to create habits about worship, like in the month of Ramadan or outside, you have to think the main purpose is because you want the pleasure of Allah, and that intention has to stay pure, so that we have ikhlas, sincerity. Try strategies which you think will work for you. Like I said, some of the strategies gelled with me more than others, and you may already, and I'm going to ask you in a minute, which one gelled with you, but just think about what is it that gels with you, which one do you think is realistic and you could apply, and so start with those, and if it doesn't work once, try again at another occasion. Don't give up. Don't give up and say, oh, it didn't work. Like even with something like habit of trying to give up a habit of smoking, it takes smokers 6 to 7 attempts before they actually give it up. It's not like people say, okay, today I'm going to stop smoking and then it's done, finished. It doesn't work that way. A lot of the habits that we have, it will take you more than one attempt to try to create those habits. The key is not to give up. You might try a different strategy next time. Maybe you need to make more dua this time. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more earnestly within your heart. So don't think I tried it once and it didn't work and it's not going to work. You just have to keep trying. So that brings me to the end, basically.